All right, let's talk to the most open and transparent congressman in America, Ro Khanna, California 17th District, the original Justice Democrat, joins us. How are you, Congressman?
Cenk, I'm wondering if I'm getting set up with that kind of an introduction, but I'll take it.
No, you're not. No, I mean it. Look, I brought you on because I want to talk about what progressives are going to do in the next 2 years, because it is an interesting and challenging question. But since the interview got booked, things have happened in California. Katie Porter has entered the California Senate race, and then Adam Schiff did as well, and now there is a lot of buzz about Barbara Lee and yourself. So, will you be entering the California Senate race?
What I've said is I'm going to take a very careful look at it, but also what Barbara does. Barbara Lee is a close friend of mine. I have admired her for a long time, especially on her anti-war advocacy. We've had a number of good conversations. We're both from Northern California. We're both progressive, and it would be a shame to be splitting that vote. So I'm waiting to see whether she's going to put together a very serious campaign, factoring that into my decision.
Interesting. Okay. And so if she doesn't run, does that mean green light?
If she doesn't run, I would say that the probability of running is much, much higher. And if she does run, it's lower. But obviously, that's not the only factor, but it is something that I will weigh seriously.
All right, makes sense. So one more thing about that. So Politico and a couple of other places had written about you're weighing a Senate run, or some advisors and other people you're connected to, but not you, talking about a presidential run. So let me ask you about that. Is there any possibility in 24, whether Biden runs or doesn't run, that you might run?
No, I would support Bernie Sanders if he didn't, and I'm still building, and not. It's 24 is not the time.
Okay, I'm hearing 28. Okay, got it. Okay, now let's go to the issue of the progressives. So, there's a lot of talk about people getting kicked off committees, et cetera. Sure, it's bad. They shouldn't be kicked off. It's obviously political retribution, not based in fact. We can skip all that. That's clear. But the question is, wait, what are we going to do on those committees? What can forget Democrats? What can progressives do in Congress over the next 2 years to make any difference at all?
One is hold the line. I know this may sound not very grand, but remember the years of triangulation where you had Bill Clinton basically go to moderate Senate Republicans, cut deals with the Republican House, and the progressive Democrats were just left holding the bag. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. We need to make sure that there are not budget agreements or other agreements with the White House, Senate majority, and Senate moderate Republicans that Democrats have to swallow that aren't good for progressive policies. The second thing is we got to push for executive action. And third, we need to organize to try to get something done in the Senate, like on Tyree Nichols. I mean, making sure that I've been pushing the Peace Act for 5 years. It finally passed the House, changed the standard of force. So like every other country, force becomes a last resort. In this country, it's not. It's if an officer thinks it's reasonable. That passed the House. What are we doing in the Senate? How do we put pressure to make sure that the Senate is acting?
So let's break those down one by one. What are the executive actions that progressives would love for Biden to take?
There are a lot on the environment. I mean, you could start by, for example, having much more strict bans on PFAS, which is causing cancer, environmental racism. You can have much stronger standards on fuel efficiency, on methane, on coal. The Inflation Reduction Act was a lot of the carrots, but there haven't been many sticks legislatively. And the question is, what are we going to do on that from an executive action point of view? You can take executive action on some of the things with immigration to finally get relief for those who are undocumented, to make sure that we're repealing Title 42 and not just denying everyone asylum claims in this country. And then we can do further things on labor. I mean, obviously we need a $15 prevailing wage, but there are other avenues of the executive branch where if they're federal contractors, that we can have labor standards, standards for apprenticeships, standards for wages.
So let's be honest, Joe Biden could do all those things tomorrow. He's chosen not to do them for the last couple of years, and it'll probably take a lot of action on progressive support to push him in that direction. Sometimes that works. We had the student debt relief, and progressives pushed on that, and Biden did take action. So it's possible. But whether it's that one or holding the line from moderate Democrats doing deals with Republicans, doesn't it require progressives to pretty actively criticize other Democrats up to and including President Biden?
Yes, and we have at times. Now, probably not as often as some of your viewers may want, but I took the New York Times op-ed in June of last year, saying the president wasn't doing enough on inflation and proposed very concrete policies, some of which, by the way, he's now doing. Like I said, why aren't we selling from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and buying back when the prices are lower? Why aren't we taking more action with a windfall profits tax on big oil? So that was one instance at the top of my head where I criticized the president's actions, but there will be times where I think we'll push for further action. I criticized the administration on the $15 wage. I said they should have fired the parliamentarian over it.
Yeah.
Or called for the firing.
Yeah, so of course, Ro, you and I know the real issue is mainstream media, because you took on Buttigieg on the airline issues, and you should have.
That's right.
And because it's not about Buttigieg, it's not about progressives versus conservatives. It's that, no, there's the Secretary of Transportation has a ton of power that he's choosing not to use, and that is deeply frustrating and problematic. But when you do that, the articles that I read critique you instead of him, saying, how dare you justifiably criticize Secretary Buttigieg? How do you get past that problem?
Well, it's very hard. I mean, I usually have no problem getting booked on CNN or MSNBC, but they didn't have me on at all to speak about the issue with the airlines, because it's hard to have any criticism. And then when Politico covered it, they covered it in light of, well, is this guy running for president one day, which was not in any way the reason. You don't launch a preemptive attack against one person in a 20-person hypothetical field in a race that you may not enter and the other person may not enter. My reason for criticizing him is that Bernie Sanders and I had called 6 months ago for fines on airlines, and the types of fines that Obama had. Obama had put $20,000, $30,000 fines if airlines were idle on the tarmac, and it worked. And we said, why don't you have those kind of fines on the airline industry if they're canceling flights? If their IT isn't working, they would have an incentive to do that. But people say, well, you wouldn't have known the IT issue at Southwest. Of course I wouldn't have known. I'm a congressman from Silicon Valley. I don't think I could have figured out that Southwest had an IT issue, nor do I need to. But I know this, if they had massive fines that they would have to pay if they canceled consumer flights, they would figure out how to get that IT fixed, just like they are now. And the Attorney General's called for this. But at the end of the day, no one wanted to discuss that the fines would have worked. And they wanted to make sure that, a person from the administration wasn't being criticized. I understand that within reason, but not at the expense of people who are being stranded.
Yeah, Ro, this is a conundrum for progressives till the end of time, as long as mainstream media exists. Because, so if Biden goes with his instinct, and his instinct is to cut deals with Republicans. So if the only deals that are to be had are with Republicans, and Biden goes to cut those, and those are conservative deals, by definition, the Republicans will never agree to anything that's in the center, let alone Democratic, let alone progressive, right? Progressives are going to have to speak out against the deal, against Biden. But then the media, which is supposed to be neutral, will yell at all of you guys and say, Biden's running for president and you're hurting his chances. This is definitely your fault. How do you handle that conundrum? Because it's definitely gonna happen.
Well, they'll say that, and they'll say you're not being bipartisan. You're not working with the other side of the aisle, and it's a challenge. Even though the policies that we're supporting are bipartisan, there's a bipartisan agreement in this country that Americans can't afford America. There's a bipartisan support for policies like Medicare for all, for free public college, free vocational education, making childcare affordable at $10 a day. These are common sense policies. Renegotiating trade deals, making sure corporate greed doesn't offshore all our jobs, rebuilding our manufacturing base by having government involved in helping build in communities that have been left out. These are our policies. They have bipartisan appeal, but they don't have appeal in the Beltway. And I think the only way to do it is to go to independent media, to go into these communities, to be on social media. Of course, you've got to go on mainstream media. I don't think a strategy of not going on is going to be successful, but you have to complement it and find ways of communicating that aren't just the traditional outlets.
And I think taking them on when you're on there, they'll hate it, but the American people will love it, and it could make a big difference in bringing attention to an issue. But so that's the last thing I want to talk about. You have proposals, whether it's the policing one that's popular. You and Bernie Sanders did the $15 minimum wage in regards to Amazon and pressuring them to do it. They did. That was successful. It's now gone to Walmart, and so that had a domino effect. So you've done this before. But when you're going to push something like paid family leave, I'm just picking it out of a hat, and it's easy to pick because it's got an 80% approval rating. So if you had a fair and clean fight on that, you would win super easy, right? But you don't have a fair and clean fight because of all the things that we've discussed here, Republicans, corporate Democrats, mainstream media, et cetera. But how do you even propose that in a situation where the Republicans have the House? Is there a way that progressives can say paid family leave and we're going to hell or high water and get it to a point where it embarrasses the Republicans enough and draws enough attention to the fact that 8 out of 10 Americans want it, that you actually win? Is that possible?
Well, we didn't do enough of this in the majority, and I realize this now. Some of us were pushing for it, but the Republicans are doing these bills now saying, communism or socialism are bad, and they're forcing Democrats to vote on it. And I don't know why we didn't have the mom and apple pie bills one at a time when we were in the majority, which some of us were saying. We did, okay, let's do Build Back Better or all our social programs, and that gave the Republicans the ability to cherry pick and say, well, we're opposed to this, and that's why we're opposed to the larger bill. But we should have had clean bills. Are you opposed to 8-week paid family leave, and force Republicans to vote on those things? Now we don't have that opportunity. We could do it in the Senate, and I would say take a few of these key votes, key issue areas, and expose where the Republicans stand. And in the House, the question is, can we get a few Republicans to come with us and have a discharge petition or a majority by building that coalition? It's going to be uphill, but we need to do it. I mean, we need to show that we're on the side of popular policies. It's very frustrating because we genuinely are on the side of popular policies, and yet we're in a 50-50 nation.
All right, Representative Ro Khanna, California's 17th district, and potential California Senate candidate, depending on Barbara Lee. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake. Always a pleasure.